So before we stopped, you were talking about how Bob would kind of point out some protocol issues on the show. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, some of the things that the paramedics, the firefighter paramedics were doing didn't make any sense to Bob. One was particularly annoying to not only him, but to us as well. And that was this whole idea that if it's red lights and siren, our helmets go on. And that was so annoying because, first off, you get into a car crash, this fire department's helmet is not going to help you. And it's always banging up against the back window because the helmets automatically kind of sloop off to the, and that's so water will sheet off, it doesn't go down the back of your neck. Well, it doesn't make for great driving when you're driving in a squad going 70, 80 miles an hour down the street. That just drove Bob crazy. And Bob kept saying, that's a stupid protocol. And they wouldn't change it. And so Bob says, okay, we're going to show you just how stupid it is. And they said, well, you don't have to show it, I guess. And he said, no. If you do it, we do it. If you have it, we have it. And if you use it, we use it, So and then, they finally said, all right, that is kind of a stupid rule because it really wasn't, wasn't even giving you a sense of safety. It had nothing to do with safety. I don't know who sits down and goes, let's make this rule. Anyway, Bob hated that. I forget what some of the other protocols that. Oh, one of the big things that Bob was never successful in getting them to change until about 4 or 5 years after the show ended, and that was if a firefighter paramedic were to be promoted to captain, he had to drop being a paramedic. To Bob, that was the biggest waste of money, time, energy, and talent that he had ever seen in his life. And he just couldn't understand why you would spend so much money to train these guys who are literally that close away from being a doctor and then say, well, if you want to promote, you can't be a paramedic anymore. He just couldn't understand that. And he argued this because he now was sitting on the board of the paramedic board of LA County, and he would argue that and argue it, and for whatever reason he could never get it changed. And so the very last show of Emergency was showing Kevin and I, or Roy DeSoto and Johnny Gage, being promoted as captains, reminiscing about their years, 7 years of service with one another, and then them having to split and go their own ways, which is pretty sad, So Bob, he pulled on the old heartstrings a little bit, but they hung in there with that protocol until about 4 or 5 years later, and he said, this is a vast waste of time and money, and let's not do it anymore.
So let's talk a little bit about the cast and then Johnny's relationship with their characters. So you've talked a little bit about Kevin, Ty, and about Johnny and Roy's relationship, but can you talk more about that? About your relationship with Kevin and about Johnny's relationship with Roy.
Oh, well, my relationship with Kevin was he was quickly becoming my best friend, and that was mirrored in the show. He was my best friend on the show, and as it turns out, he was my best friend off the show, behind the cameras as well. In fact, a lot of people don't know this, but the year after the show ended, I lost my house in a brush fire, and by this time I was shooting another show at Universal, Operation Petticoat, but my connections with Kevin were still solid, and with Bob Senator, who wasn't the producer of this new show I was doing, but Bob Senator and firefighters and what have you. And I'm on the set, and I get a call from Bob Senator, and he said, Randy, because Bob is such a fire buff, even though he was doing a whole other show that had nothing to do with the fire department, he said, Randy, he said, I'm listening to the scanners, and he said, there was there were 4 engines dispatched to Lobo and Triumphal Canyon. And I went, that's where I live. He goes, I know. And I said, oh, well, I'm sure I'm okay. because I thought I had a fireproof house. And I said, I'm sure I'm okay. And he said, well, I just thought I'd let you know that. He said, they're setting up camp there. And I went, wow, it's that close? So I literally got in the car, said, I got to go home, found my house burned down. Anyway, found out that Kevin was there. He was there trying to save some of my animals. And so that's a good friend.
Absolutely. Let's talk about Julie London and Johnny's relationship with Dixie McCall.
Yeah, Johnny's relationship with Dixie, he loved her because she was always, a lot of people say, hey, did you ever have a crush on Julie London? She was 2 years younger than my mom. No, I didn't have a crush on her, but I loved her. I loved her and Bobby so much, and that love was reciprocated. And Kevin, we were like their sons, But Dixie probably trained Johnny, and of course, Johnny knows a good-looking woman when he sees one. But that's also the woman who trained him to be a paramedic, so he's not going to openly flirt with her. But he likes being around her. Hi, Dix. How you doing? That's that relationship. And of course, Bobby Troop. I don't know whether a lot of people know this or not, but Bobby Troop wrote the song Route 66, and he's such a. I just loved him. I remember Kevin and I were over at their house. Now, Julie was married to Jack Webb, had 3 kids by Jack. Bobby was married to, I forgot who, but he had 3 kids of his own. Julie and Bobby get married, they have 3 kids. So they got 9 kids. It's like Mom and Pa Kettle over there. And I remember it was just this typical Hollywood kind of low furniture, view of Studio City, piano. Julie was a torch singer, right? Sang Cry Me a River. She was so good at that. And of course, Bobby, that's how they met, in jazz club. And Bobby was always trying to get Julie to sing. Julie wouldn't sing. Julie, more and more as time went on, she became agoraphobic. She just didn't want to get out of the house. And it kind of all started when she just didn't want to sing anymore. Dinah Shore tried to get her to sing on her show. It was painful to watch because Julie just wouldn't do it. And Dinah Shore says, Julie, you have the most beautiful voice in the world, please, And Bobby keeps saying, I just keep telling her, We're sitting in their living room, and the kids are all just kind of, this big, sprawling house in Studio City, up on the top, looking out over the valley, and the lights were shimmering. It was just typical what you imagine Hollywood should be like. The low furniture, and the low coffee table, and the pillows, and Julie and Bobby were always drinking these drinks in these fancy, like a martini or something. Oh God, it was just like a movie. Anyway, so Bobby was always tinkling on the thing. Come on, Julie, sing this with me. No, I'm not. Bobby, stop it. Leave me alone. Come on, Julie. And we're just kind of sitting around. And I said, Bobby, did you really write Route 66? I said, because the Rolling Stones just did. And he goes, yeah. I said, wow, what does it feel like to have the Rolling Stones sing your song? And he goes, no, ask me what it was like to have Nat King Cole sing my songs. I went, oh, okay, he's a different generation, And so anyway, he was sitting there tinkling on the phone, on the piano, and he started telling me how he wrote the song. He'd just been released from the Marine. He was in the Marine Corps, and he had just shipped out, decommissioned, I guess, in Chicago. And but he was actually stationed in North Carolina, I believe it was. But anyway, he shipped out in Chicago, and he decided, that's it. I want to, because he was involved in music in North Carolina with the Marine Corps, and so he says, that's it. I'm going to go to L.A. I've been dreaming about it. So he got in his car and he got onto Route 66, and the windshield wiper was going, and the song started to come through his head. And all this time he was going through towns, and these towns were coming to him, and he started to rhyme some of these towns. And he said the song was totally, I just couldn't get the end until I went through Winona. And he said, then my song was done. And I remember sitting there as he's playing it, telling this like this, you know. And I remember going, remember this, Randy. This is really important.
That's a great story. And talk about Johnny's relationship with Dr. Brackett.
Well, you know, I love Bob. I really do. Bob, you know, and I get it now, but at the time, Bob was the star of the show in the very beginning. And then these two young guys come in and kind of steal your thunder. I get that now. I'm older, right? So I see that happen all around me. And so I felt bad for Bob because it was Bob's show. Because NBC said, you know, you can have your show about firefighters, whatever. And even Jack said, you know, the firefighters are just going to bring victims in to the hospital so they can have good scenes. We were just an ancillary thing that was going to help move along the hospital scene because it was originally supposed to be a hospital show. But more and more, the public gravitated to the firefighters because there's more action, more stuff going on. And so Bob, you know, Bob was the star, and then Julie, and then Bobby, and then me and Kevin. But as the show went on, my agent even said, well, we think you two should be up in the front. I went, oh my God, no. Oh my God, no. I don't need to have my face up there first because that would totally destroy my relationship with Julie and Bobby wouldn't have cared, but Bob would have. And, you know, having a good working relationship with Bob was very important. Bob is a quintessential professional. He always knew his lines. I never heard that guy go up before. I go up all the time, you know. Never Bob. And not only he takes bad writing, says it verbatim, and makes it good. Don't know how you do that. Don't know how you do that. That's how good Bob was. And so Bob, you know, and Bob didn't want to play the role at first. Bob always envisioned himself as being a cowboy. You know, all the Westerns he did. That's what he wanted to do. In fact, he's retired, lives on a ranch in northern Dallas right now. But for him to be a doctor, he couldn't understand, you know, but Jack Webb fell in love with his voice. Jack has that deep voice. Bob Fuller, he calls the house and he goes, hi, Kristen, this is Bob. Is Randy there? And Kristen goes, oh, my God, it's Bob Fuller. He's on the line. Have him say it again. But you know, of course, Fuller was the authoritarian, and Johnny always respected that, you know. And there'd be times when he'd pout and, you know, whatever. But when Brackett said, yeah, because he knew Brackett had his back, always had his back. And the same thing with Roy DeSoto as well.
Talk about Ron Pinkert as Dr. Mike Morton.
Yeah, Ron was a medic in the Navy. And he is no bullshit. Sorry, I don't know whether bullshit goes into the archives. He was just like, Mr. This is... Lay down. Yeah. Boom. Boom. And the directors finally just kind of got out of his way. Just, you know, he knows what he's doing. And there were times when he would boss those nurses around, and it wasn't in the script. We're all going, "Oh, that's not in the script. That's so cool." And they'd jump. The nurses would jump. And they're just extras. Nurse, get that right. It was great. It was great. I loved watching Morton work. He was good. He was all business. Loved it.
So let's talk in general about the crew of Engine 51. Talk about those guys and the mix of actors and real life firefighters that were part of that team.
Yeah, that was one of the things that made it really great. Was that Mike Stoker was a real firefighter, and he got that job by default because that was the fire department's rig. And they said, well, we're going to have to hire an actor to, and they said, no, you're not. Nobody's driving that but a firefighter. We can't do that. You know, he's got to be an actor. No, do whatever you want. Go find your own rig. Go buy your own rig. So they said, oh, geez. all right, send us all your actors that have Screen Actor Guild card. He walks in, and I think he answers 4 or 5 things like, what's your name? And I said, just because he can talk, you hired him? Yeah, we don't have a lot of time. So Mike Stoker's the luckiest firefighter in the world. For 7 years, he played himself, Mike Stoker. Of course, Marco Lopez, he was Jack's stand-in for years and years and years. Jack Webb's stand-in. So, of course, Marco got the job. And then Tim Donnelly. There are times when Tim is the most charming individual in the world. You just love him to death. And there are other times you just want to choke him to the ground. You know, it's like, oh, God, Tim. He was so much like that character that it was like, you know, are you Tim or are you, you know, are you Chet now? The captain, God, I love Mike Norrell. Mike Norrell came on, I think, in the second season, because they were always looking for a captain. Our very first captain was a real firefighter, real captain. He was so nervous. He was so glad. He spent almost a year playing it. He was so glad to be off the show. I'm a firefighter. I'm not an actor. And the poor guy, but we loved him, Mike Hammer. What a great name. I'm Mike Hammer. I'm a firefighter. But who's that guy? Oh, Mike Stoker. Or Mike Norrell. Mike Norrell had the driest sense of humor. He was so, but he didn't know how far he could go because he knew he was really the new guy there for a couple, 2 or 3 years. Then one day when I knew he hit his stride, I still remember this moment. Johnny always eats with his mouth open and talks with his mouth crammed with food. Why, where, why I thought that was very funny. I mean, I was just doing it naturally and normally and just talking and everything. Well, you know, such bad manners to teach little kids now. But nonetheless, it was his line. And Mike Norrell, you know, Mike never really ad-libbed that much. He pretty much played it straight because he didn't want to lose his job, and he really liked working. There was this line. I think it was the mechanic. He accused us of messing around with the squad when we shouldn't be, and it wasn't working, whatever. And he left, and he was barking at Mike Norrell, at the captain. And Mike turns to me, and I'm eating this sandwich. He says, "Are you guys playing?" Oh, he said, "I hate your coffee, and plus you're messing with the squad, and blah, 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 and plus this coffee tastes like crap." And he throws the coffee and walks out. And he goes, "Are you guys playing games with him?" And I said, with my mouth full, "Cap, I didn't make the coffee." He goes, and this is an ad lib, "I'm not talking about the coffee, you twit. I'm talking about," we called Johnny Cage a twit, right? But it was so funny. And he goes, "I made the coffee." Well, that line wasn't in there either. And the egg salad that I was eating flew out of my mouth. And that was one of those moments where I went, "You've arrived, Mike. That was hilarious. You actually made me laugh on camera." Those are moments you just don't forget.
That's great. I mean, what did the having those experienced firefighters as part of the acting gang mean to the show? What did it bring to the show?
Reality, realism, that you can't, that you just can't fake that. And they don't dramatically put out the fire. They just put out the fire. Where nowadays, people are putting out fires and they're posing. It's like, dude, that's a good way to die. Just put out the fire. And when you see it, the audience just instinctively knows it. They innately know the truth when they see it. And they also innately know when you're acting, when you're posing. And it's little things like that. Now, did I know that at the time? No. This is like 4 years of retrospect where I look back and I go, oh, my God. And I'll watch it and I'll go, these are real firefighters and they're doing the real thing. And you can probably see this on the 6 o'clock news. Where you watch other shows, and I'm not going to say, you watch other shows, and you're going, yeah, it's pretty spectacular, but really?
So let's talk about some of the other really realistic elements of the show. You had mentioned the rig. Talk about that truck,
The squad?
the squad, yeah.
Yeah. Well, that was owned by the show, but there was only one. And so if we wrecked it, there was hell to pay. So we didn't mess with that. There were times when it would break down, and of course, the finest mechanics in the world were rushed in to do their analysis and defib it and get it back on the gear. But basically, that rig was a 1972 Dodge, and from that point on, somebody just told me this, no self-respecting firefighter or paramedic will have anything. They tried to go with the old box ambulance kind of thing, and I think the city is doing that now, but they said no self-respecting fire department would ever have anything but the squad. And got to say that probably those big square things are probably a little bit better, more suited, but tradition is hard to break with the fire department. So having all this equipment, there was nothing phony about that, any of those rigs. That was a real pumper. That was a real squad. And it's still around. It's at the museum, the California, the LA County Fire Museum. And they spent so much money on it, it looks exactly like the very first day I ever slid my butt across that vinyl. It's like, wow. And I remember this. Yeah, I remember this.
Cool. And talk about your uniform.
Oh, the baby blue powder uniform. Oh, I hated that uniform. But after a while, I got to where, if a firefighter or paramedic doesn't have blue, and they say to me, nobody wants to change that uniform. It's now tradition. That's what all the fire. They are going with white and other things. And if you ask a firefighter or a paramedic, they'll say, "No, just give us the blues." So it was our badge. Our badge. It's enrolled on the rolls. I'm 330. Kevin is 240. It's our badge. Those are real badges. And in fact, they tried to take them away from us from the show, and they said, "No, this is LA County property." And I said, "Wow, I lost it." I didn't lose it. I got it at home. They said, "We know where you have it. Just don't flash it and permaplaque it." All right, I'll permaplaque it.
Talk about the firehouse set. Was it modeled after a real?
Oh yeah, 127s. Yeah, that whole station is 127s down in Compton, or not in Compton, but in Carson. Yeah, 127s. In fact, that's where we shot all of our exterior, and then they just built an exact mock-up of the interior on stage. And to this day, that has become Mecca for firefighters. They find that station, they go in, and the guys are great. They go, they all want to know where Johnny Gage slept. Right over there. They all want to know. And they wander around, and they have this big plaque. And it was later named after Bob Senator. There's a big plaque of Bob Senator bust, just like you guys have out here, but of Bob Senator, and they've renamed it R.A. Senator Station 127s. And then on the door going into the kitchen, into the den area, there's this sign that says "Home of the Show." So they're all there, and they're great. They're very patient because people just roll up, and they know people are going to do it. They go, "Yeah, come on in." Yeah, they slept over there. Yeah, they ate here. Yeah, the squad was here.
When the show first came on the air, how did firefighters react to you?
Well, the thing, very well. I mean, they were so ecstatic that they had a show about them, because there's always shows about cops. There's always shows about lawyers and doctors, but here's a show about the fire department. I mean, their hair just stood up on end. It's like, yeah, hun, that's what I do. So they all accepted. We were immortalized. They could have, poured bronze over us. We couldn't do anything wrong. They took to us very well. Mainly because we didn't want to make them look bad. We wanted to make them look exactly who they were, heroes. Where now, everybody's got to have a flaw, you know? Drives me crazy. I don't care about your flaws. Just show me what you do. How's the job done? And do it real. Show me, you know?
And what about fans in general at the time? How did people react to you when you walked down the street?
Well, you have to understand, adults weren't watching the show. Kids were watching the show. So walking down the street was okay as long as there weren't kids. Now, I could go into a bar, and nobody knew who the hell I was, because they're not at home watching Emergency on Saturday night at 8 o'clock. But I go into the grocery store. Now, the kids are following me going down the aisle going, oh, look, he's buying mayonnaise. You know, it's like, so I couldn't do that very well. But I could go into the bar, and it's like, shoot, nobody knows who I am. Well, you know, this isn't going to work. And then as the show ended and it went into syndication, you know, and the kids grew up, now they're in the bars, and, you know, the other people are in the grocery stores. I can go to any grocery store in the world, and they don't give a damn whether I'm buying mayonnaise or not. I can't now go into the bars because now everybody recognizes me. And that's okay to a point. You know, every actor likes to be, you know, hey, I really like your work. Just not all night long. You know, it's like after a while you get beat down with it. And that sort of notoriety was always very difficult for me, especially when it got frenetic, you know, when it became like kind of crazy. If somebody just comes up and says, hey, I really like your work, that makes my day. But keep moving, you know. I don't need to be signing autographs for your entire family now. But, you know, I'll shake hands with them, I'll smile, I'll do whatever, you know. But when you sort of get mobbed, then because you don't know how to tell them, hey, I'm playing a fictional character. You know, you don't want to bust their dreams, but by the same token, you don't want to be mobbed. And that always bothered me. That whole star thing really got to me. Thought I wanted it. And then when you get there, you go, ooh, there's a terrible price that you pay for this stuff.
And did you have any, you mentioned like a mob, do you have a memorable experience where it got out of control?
No, not necessarily that. It gets a little frenetic. It gets a little crazy. But I think it's when people start coming to your house. That gets downright creepy. And then I found out, that's why I moved way out in Agoura, and you had to literally cross a stream to get to my house with no bridge. You literally have to drive into the thing. And this woman had driven all the way from Montana with her child in the back, and parked down below. And of course, I couldn't see her. I'm way up on my ranch, and my neighbor called and said, "Hey, you got a car down here, Montana license plates. This crazy girl. She spent the night in her car last night. She's waiting down here, and she's got a baby." Really? And I went, I'm going to call the sheriff. So the sheriff comes, and the sheriff says, "What are you doing?" And she said, "Well, I'm here to see Randolph Mantooth. You know, I understand he lives here." "Yeah, but you can't do this." Well, so she had to get off my road, but she went on the public road. Now they can't do anything about it. And they told me, they drove up and they said, "We can't really make her move from there, but there is something wrong with her." And they said, "Now, if she spends the night again, one more night with that child in the car, now we can do something." I said, "Well, I got to go. I got to leave." And they said, "Well, we can't make her leave." So it's that. And then, of course, I left, and she chased me all the way down the freeway until I finally lost her. But I was like, should I really be speeding? Because she's going to speed, and she's got this baby behind there. So that's what I mean about, you know, so when I hear these stories, you know, with Alec Baldwin, and, you know, and I like Alec. I like Alec a lot. And I know he's not this crazy guy that everybody says. I know he's not. He's a pretty level-headed guy. He has a temper just like everybody else. But man, when that sort of stuff, when people just get into your personal life like that, that's not just annoying. That's kind of dangerous.
Yeah, it's terrible. Why do you think the show appealed to people so much?
Well, very good reason. They had never really seen a show about the fire department before, especially done in a real sense. But the key here is that nobody knew what a paramedic was. This is a brand new field. I didn't know what it was. And all of America looks up from their dinner tables or whatever at 8 o'clock and they went, huh? What's this? You can do that? Firefighters can do that? Wait a minute. That's what I want. So it was a whole brand new thing. So everybody says, you think they'll ever make the show again? I hope not, because it'll never be successful. Those shows aren't ever successful anyway. So it's like trying to catch lightning in a bottle. What made the show unique was it was a brand new thing, and it was educating the public. Paramedics. My God, who would have thought? You can actually do this. And it changed the face of emergency medicine forever.
Did you have to do a lot of promotion for the show?
Nah, we didn't. We didn't have the time. You have to understand, we were, for 5 of those 7 years, we were against All in the Family. We were against, and we never won our hour. For the first 2 years, we thought we were going to get canceled, or I did. And they said, no, I said, yeah, but just kids are watching, And they said, yeah. I went, really? I want them to see me act, I don't want to be a kid's hunk, But for all those years, we never. Oh God, this is great. This has happened at the Producers Awards. Yeah, the Emmys for the Producers Awards. So I'm in the crowd. It's either directors or producers. I think it was producers. So I'm in the crowd, and it's all done, and it's over, and we're about to walk out and everything. And I'm with a real good friend of mine, Screech Washington. Maybe you know him. Anyway, he was one of the executive producers on Amazing Race. And if you don't believe him, just ask him about his 7 Emmys. Anyway, not that I'm not complaining about his 7 Emmys, but so I'm sitting there, I'm talking to him. I look up, and I see Norman Lear. And I'm like, oh my God, there's Norman Lear. Because I went and bought a videotape machine. They really did have videotape machines back in those days. And I would tape my show, but I would watch All in the Family because I loved that show. And then I would, watch Emergency afterwards. And I went up to Norman Lear, and I said, I've been wanting to meet you for so long, And he says, oh, well, thank you. And I said, for 7 years, you kicked our ass on TV. And I said, but still, I wanted to watch, your show even over mine. And we thought we wouldn't get picked up, and blah, 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 blah. And he goes, who are you? Okay, well, big impression there.
So after all this training and after playing Johnny for 7 years, did you ever think I could be a real paramedic?
Yeah, I did. I got over that real quick, but yeah. No, actually, at the end of the year, this is not to be a paramedic, but at the end of the year, Chief Houts was the chief at that time. And it was done, the show was over, we're about ready to do this big wrap party, and we're all kind of sitting around having cocktails in Bob Senator's office, and we're about to go down to the stage to this big, huge, the end of the 7-year wrap party and everything, and Chief Houts comes up to me, and I thought, oh God, he's going to get on to me about my hair, and because by that time he was constantly saying, Gage, get a haircut. I'm not Gage, I'm Randy Mantooth. You're really screwing this up. Anyways, he comes up to me and he goes, you want to be a firefighter? And I went, what? I mean, that was the last thing I expected him to say. He goes, I've already trained once, and he said, if you want to do this, he said, I can grease the skids for you. He said, you will have to train again. And he said, and if you want to be a paramedic, and I went, whoa, stop. I said, are you serious? And he said, yeah. And I went, I totally don't know what to say here. And I actually went home and I actually thought about it. And I thought, because it was one of the greatest compliments in the world. And I thought to myself, the money I make as a firefighter and the money I make as an actor. And I went, ah. And then I came back to him and I said, I think I can be of more help to you as an actor than I would ever be as a firefighter.
It seems like you've developed quite a respect for that profession.
Yeah. It's probably one of the most noble professions, that anybody could possibly have, especially if you're a firefighter paramedic. To me, that's God, When I was shooting the show, I was living out in Topanga Canyon. I was renting a place out in Topanga Canyon, California. And it was in the winter. It was in December. It was December of '75. I didn't realize that the furnace that was operating down in the basement was malfunctioning, and carbon monoxide was leaking up into my house. And so I would get up. I would always have this raging headache, and I was feverish, and I was red, and I was like, and I thought I had the flu because it was in December, and it was real close to Christmas, and I knew that I wanted to go back to my grandpa and grandma and grandpa's house for what I thought would be their last Christmas, take all my family back to Nebraska. And I didn't want to miss that. It was very important. And I thought, oh, man, I'm getting a flu. And I'd call into work and I'd say, guys, I don't think I can make it. And they said, hey, unless you're dead, you're coming in. We'll put a cot up next to the camera. We'll lift you up. You can say your lines. We'll lay you back down. But you're not going to, no. And so thank God they made me come into work because, with carbon monoxide poisoning, the more air you get, the more it starts to flush from your system. So as a firefighter, especially an actor portraying a firefighter, you're always doing something physical. You're rappelling down, you're running, you're working yourself out, and you're flushing yourself. So by the end of the day, I was feeling pretty good. And I thought, well, maybe I don't have the flu. I'd go home, and then it'd start the whole cycle again. And the only thing that was saving my life was the fact that my window, I'm claustrophobic, so a window has to be open somewhere in my house. Well, that window happened to be right above my bed. So it was just keeping me alive. And then one night, I came home on a Friday night, and I turned on the thing. I was feeling pretty good. And within about an hour, I was feeling like crap again. And I said, you know something? I'm never going to get better as long as that window's open. Thump. And that's about the last thing I remember. And I remember, my pet was scratching at me because he was dying too. And I kept throwing him off. Crawled to the phone. Of all things, carbon monoxide can make you so stupid. I called my landlord. I didn't call 911. I called my landlord. And he said he heard this. So we were always goofing around with one another. And I said, hey, Mike, I said, I think I'm dying. And I knew I was dying. I just couldn't figure out why I was dying. Why am I dying? But I knew I was dying because I could feel myself just slip. And he at first said, hey, we're all dying, And he said, then you didn't say anything. And he said, so I called 911. Well, the sheriff came. Sheriff, since I was an actor, I lived in Topanga Canyon, I'm on drugs. So I overdosed. So he just wanted to get me off the floor, get me in an ambulance, and get me out of there. Well, the two firefighter paramedics who showed up knew who I was, of course, because I was still shooting the show. And they weren't so sure. And so there was this huge argument. I don't know. They just told me about this because I was sort of napping on the floor at the time. And they were arguing about whose scene it was. And the sheriff said, it was my scene. I was first on scene. And they said, unless you're a doctor, this isn't your scene, this is our scene. So they were arguing back and forth about that. And finally they figured out, hey, this is carbon monoxide. They couldn't smell it, because by the time everybody got in there, windows open, doors open, everything's sort of flushed out. So they put me on oxygen on the floor. It was the most important thing that they did, rather than just get me out. Kept me on oxygen all the way into the ambulance, all the way to the hospital. The doctor said, Dr. Michael Ludsky, who I still have as my doctor, was the attending emergency doctor, and said, you had a count of 22, 18 and 19 is death. So how I survived that, I have no idea. I don't know why that happened. It's just that I never forgot that. I never forgot why it is other people die and I didn't. And then in 1985, my sister, while driving with her 6-year-old son, was driving in a driving rainstorm in Houston, Texas, and she got T-boned. And her injuries were such that she had to be medevaced out. And when my sister was on that, when my sister was on that helicopter, she died. And a firefighter, paramedic, and a flight nurse brought her back and worked on her hard until they got her to the hospital. 12 years ago, my sister danced with that same 6-year-old little boy at his wedding. So, do I respect paramedics? Do I respect firefighters? There's a debt I owe them that I probably can't ever pay back, but I'm going to try.
Well, you certainly have done a lot for them. Let's talk about some of the rescues on the show. Do you have a favorite rescue?
Well, they're all different. You know, I love the funny ones. I like the real dramatic ones. I love all the ones where I'm climbing because I just loved climbing. I was like a monkey, like a kid that never grew up. But I think probably one of my favorites was the snakebite one, and that was because Jim Page wrote that. And I thought it was so appropriate. And I remember saying to him when I was reading the script, I said, wait a minute, I thought we were supposed to keep this real. And he said, we are keeping it real, and especially him. He's a captain, a battalion chief. And I said, start my own IV? You can't do that. He goes, yes, you can do that. I said, you can't start your own IV? I said, how is that possible? And he said, have you ever seen a junkie? And I went, oh, yeah, I guess maybe you can start your own IV. So I think that was my favorite. Then the snake bite, working around the snake. And I wasn't afraid of the snake, but they put on these big things up underneath my pants. And they said, he has no fangs. And I said, all right, okay. And so, you know, I'm taunting him like this. And it was hard to get him to strike at me, you know. Finally, he struck at me and above the leather, and he hung onto my pants. And I'm telling you, I was shaking my leg like that, and I shook him off, and I went, I thought you said he didn't have any teeth. And they said, well, there was a little snaggle there. I went, good grief, guys, you know, at least get me, you know, leather up higher then. But working with all those animals, loved it. I remember the time that this tiger took this big, huge liking to Kevin and, you know, just about ate him. And Kevin was like, I was like, whoa, he really likes you, Kevin. And I got out of there. He was pinning Kevin to the ground, and they're huge. His head's the size of this this right here. It's like, I've never seen anything so big in my life. So it's things like that. It's little bits and flashes and pieces. Another time, it was a plane crash in a tree. Oh, my God, this is hilarious. And we're all up high, and Kevin doesn't like being up high. And so we had this girl. She's a very pretty girl. And I think it was one of her first roles, so she was acting, you know. And so Kevin is way up high, and he was told, put some gauze around her head like this. And he had all this dialogue. So he had to do this, say his dialogue, and still not fall. So he kept wrapping this gauze. And this gauze got like this. Like this, and this poor girl was acting her ass off through this little, looked like she was acting through a toilet paper tube. Like this, and finally the director goes, cut, Kevin. He looks over. He had wrapped her entire head. It's moments like that that I cherish forever. And I almost fell out of the tree. I was laughing so hard. And even Kevin had to laugh. He goes, yeah, you know, he says, please don't anybody give me any gum right now. So, yeah, it's good memories.
Is there any rescue that you remember that was particularly scary to shoot or really Physically
glad it was over.
challenging? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Out there, I think it was out on Catalina Island. We were in the surf, and I think I mentioned I don't really like cold water. We're in the surf, and we're rescuing this guy that's up on the rocks, and we were constantly being picked up by the waves and slammed into the rocks. Constantly. Kevin was having the time of his life. He thought he was a walrus. Me, I just wanted let's get this guy off the rocks, let's get him in the Stokes, let's get out of here. And I wanted out of that scene so bad. And Kevin was he was purposely missing the rock, and I'm like, dude, I can see you do that. You just want to be out here forever. And I said, if you miss it the next time, I'm going in without you. And I did. I went in without him. And he finally caught it. And so that was one of those times when, yeah, I want out. I want out of this.
You also directed 2 episodes of the show.
So did Kevin.
So how did that come about, and was that something you always had wanted to do?
How they came about is that Bob Sinergy just got tired of listening to us say we want to direct. We just annoyed the hell out of him. And he let Kevin direct the first time, and I thought, God, if he can do it, I know I can do it. And I told him, I said, if you can do this, I can do this. And so it was a kind of a competition between us, but I had a blast doing it. I found out that you can't act and direct at the same time. Something suffers. And so they quickly broke Johnny's leg, and he had to be in the hospital, and the rest I got to direct on my own. But I had a blast. And I only got, that show was only good because the crew loved me. They loved Kevin. They went that extra mile. I would walk up to Bud Thackeray, who was our cinematographer, and I'd go, hey, Bud, I have no idea what to do here. And he goes, well, you just move the camera over there. And I said, okay, all right, yeah, move the camera, yeah. I said, all right. If it weren't for Bud, the second time around, I sort of knew, but I was sort of dying from improvements too. It's like, I got one under my belt. Now I think, I'm Otto Preminger or something. But it was good to direct. I loved it.
Did you consider doing more of it?
No. Yeah, but not seriously. Yeah, I've always considered directing again. Would love to, but if I was really serious about it, I would have done it. So.
And how did your other castmates react to you as a director in that role?
Well, again, nothing really ever changed. I would direct them, and they would, sort of do, and I'd go cut. Oh my God, actors, and of course we were all just laughing. They took it very well. They took it very well.
The show had some spin-offs and crossovers we talked a little bit about earlier, but in particular, there was an animated series called Emergency 4, and you voiced the character of Johnny Gage. So did you approach the character differently in voiceover than you did in live action?
I don't know what I did. I just did it to get out of town. Look, when the show is done, the last thing you want to do, you're working every day, except for maybe a month and a half out of the year. Every day you're working. When the show is done, I personally don't want to work anymore. I'm going on vacation. And at that time, I decided I wanted to go camping, and I wanted to go to camping in Nova Scotia. Why Nova Scotia? Probably because it looked the farthest away from LA as I could get. So me and my best friend and his wife, we went camping in March in Canada. Canada has 2 seasons, winter and summer. It wasn't summer, it was in March and April. Anyway, so all of a sudden it became winter camping. But anyway, so finally I thought, man, maybe I should just check my answering machine back home. I'm in Maine. I'm in the woods of Maine. Hello? Everybody's like going nuts way before cells, right? No cells, no way to get a hold of anybody, just an answering machine at home. Hi, this is Randy. Where the hell are you? And he said, we have this. And I said, I'm camping. I'm not going to be there. No, you have to. I don't have to do anything. I'm not going to do it. And so I was negotiating under a pine tree going, really? I said, I'm not coming home early. I'm with other people. And they said, okay, we'll fly you here. All you have to do is do 3 days of work, and then we'll fly you back, And I said, well, how much am I getting out of this? I was making them so angry. And this poor guy, it was his idea. He was the executive producer. He thought I hated him. I didn't hate him. I just didn't want to be the voice of a cartoon. So I said, hey, guys, so I went to Portland, Maine, parked my car in the parking lot, took a plane back. For 3 days, I was the biggest pain in the butt. I'm just ashamed of it. But I was. And they were like, God, thank God, get him out of here. So that idea went nowhere. I'm sure that, I just didn't, I didn't want to do something, I didn't want to be a slave to the show. And with all these other things that were coming in, I saw myself for the next foreseeable future doing nothing but emergency stuff. And I was burning out. I needed to go away. So, what you hear, I don't know what you hear because I don't ever watch the thing. So the Johnny Cage that's on that cartoon is a pissed off Johnny Cage that would rather be camping. That's all I can say.
There was a spin-off of the show called Sierra, and there was an attempted spin-off that was an episode called 905 Wild.
905 Wild, right.
Why do you think those shows didn't have the same success that Emergency did?
Well, because Emergency was about something new. It was about paramedics. And 905 Wild, I don't know what that show was all about. I really don't. The Sierra, I kind of like that show on a personal level, but I could sort of see, after a while, there were so many people falling off of rocks and a bear in a camp, and, how do you sustain it? I don't know. With Emergency, it's totally different. It's L.A. Things are always burning and people are always ODing and things were always happening. You take it up into the bucolic Yosemite, and there's a chipmunk gone wild in my tent. Can you come and get it? I don't know how you sustain something like that. And here again, I don't know what 901 Wild was because by that time I was pretty much out of there and was on to doing something else.
Well, let's talk about the end of the series. When and why did it come to an end, and were you ready for that?
Yeah. It came to an end because Kevin and our 7-year contract was up, and Kevin didn't want to do the show anymore, and I didn't want to do it without him. So we said, and that's why they did those 7 2-hour movies because I think a part of it was, if the boys see that we're going to try to replace them with somebody, they might come back around and re-sign a contract and everything. Now, that didn't work. We just thought, this was great. We're going to go to Seattle, and we only have 2 days to work. This is great. So we sat out that year of working half the hours and getting more money.
That's great. We talked a little bit about your respect for paramedics and firefighters. It seems like over the years you've developed a relationship with them, and also you're part of Project 51. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Everybody brings up Project 51. It hasn't existed now for like 10 years.
Okay.
Project 51 was, that was when they had redone, and everybody that talks about Project 51, I keep thinking, maybe we should bring it back because it really was a great project. When the Smithsonian Museum of American History, National History, took the show and then inducted it along with all of our gear and everything. They wanted the squad, but LA County wouldn't let them have that. They took all the gear and they put it in the museum. And we did a 10-city tour. We took 10 cities to drive it all the way back to Washington, D.C. And so the money that was collected and made for that, all that money was used for a children's burn center. And we raised quite a bit of money and a lot of awareness of children. There's something that firefighters can deal with just about anything. They really can. There's one thing that's their Achilles heel: children. When they go and rescue children, they don't get over that. They will joke about the darndest things back at the station, some pretty horrific things, but not with children. Children is a stone cold sobering moment for them. So that's why we chose to help the burned children, not just in one area, all over the United States.
Where were you on September 11th, and how did that impact you, especially given your role on emergency?
Yeah, I was here in Los Angeles, and my best friend called and said, "We're being attacked. We're being attacked." And we woke up. It's like about 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock in the morning. It was like we both sat up and we went, "Was that Brendan?" And he says, "Those bastards are attacking us. Turn on the TV. Turn on the TV." And by the time I got to the phone, he had hung up. So I turned on the TV and watched. The South Tower is already hit. And then I watched the second tower get hit. And then I watched it all come down. And that was devastating. Devastating. But it's hard to tell you what the thoughts were, because it was mostly numbness, not knowing what to think. And so this is September 11th, and on October the 15th, I think, they were still digging. And I wanted to go down there. And so I talked to a lot of firefighter friends of mine who were in New York, and the place was just filled with every firefighter from every nation I'd ever seen in my life. I'd never seen New York so jammed with firefighters before. And I met up with some of these Wisconsin firefighters, about 6 or 7 of us. And they said, "Hey, we've been invited to go down there," because I knew that they had set up a police line where you couldn't go down. And so my wife and I and forget another friend of mine, we said, "We want to go with you." And they said, "Oh, absolutely." So we took a cab as far down as we could, and we started walking the rest of the way, and we got behind the lines. They showed their badges and everything, and we went to the station that was right across the street from it. We're up on the roof, and you could smell death, plastic and death and burning, and you could smell it. But then I started to taste it. And then I started to get very, very depressed. And then all of a sudden the bell went off across the way, and we turned, and the firefighters their station, it was their station, they said, "Oh, they found another piece of body." So out they come with some body part on a. Everybody stopped on the construction line, and we're across the street looking straight down in the thing, and everybody took their helmets off, and the body went through. Put their helmets back on, and I turned and I went, "I don't want to be here." It was so selfish for me to want to go down there. Why would I want to see that? So I said, "I'm out." So I went back. Never do that again. I don't know why the hell I thought I wanted to see that. I didn't want to see it.
We're going to stop and change tapes.
Okay.